Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another program of the INSS podcast series, broadcasted to you from our new studios here at the INSS Tel Aviv. My name is Adi Kantor. I'm a research associate at the Institute. Next to me in the desk today is senior researcher, Colonel Reserve Advocate Pnina Sharvit Baruch, who heads the program on law and national security in the INSS. Pnina, a warm welcome to you, and thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
So we're gathered today in order to discuss probably one of the most burning issues on the Israeli agenda at the moment, the new legislative reform, seen by many even as an attempt for a legislative coup. The reform was first introduced to the Israeli public by Justice Minister Yariv Levin on January 4th this year, and has since then managed to receive growing criticism from numerous sectors in the Israeli society. In order to understand exactly how dramatic and unprecedented the situation is, I begin with the words of the President of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Esther Chayut, in her public speech just 2 weeks ago, when referring to the dangerous outcomes of the legislative reform. This is a plan to crush the justice system. It is designed to deal a fatal blow to the independence of the judiciary and silence it. Moreover, she added, the 75th anniversary of Israel's independence will be remembered as the year in which the country's democratic identity was dealt a fatal blow. End of quote. The purpose of today's talk is to understand in depth just how severe this call for reform is in the judicial system, what are its principles and characteristics, what are its implications on social, legal, economic, security levels, and what may be the repercussions from the side of the international community, and what should be the recommendations for the government based on the following analysis. So Pnina, before we delve into the legislative reform itself and try to understand its background and characteristics, I think a good point of departure for this discussion is first to point out some important definitions which will serve us as base for this talk. One of the most discussed terms in the media discourse today is liberal democracy, as it seems it's going under attack. In your research publication, co-authored with Dr. Yosef, you begin by addressing the essence of a democratic regime. You mentioned the existence of a system of checks and balances in which there's a clear division of powers between the three authorities, the government, the Knesset, and the Supreme Court. What is the nature of relations between these three authorities in a liberal democracy, as you see it?
So we can talk 1 hour just about what is a democracy, but to be concise, first of all, a democracy basically, of course, is the majority rules. There are free and fair elections open to everyone. People can vote, their vote is counted, and they choose their government. So that's, of course, a very important tenet of democracy, but it doesn't end there. And that's part of the discourse today in Israel. So the next point is, as you mentioned, the idea of checks and balances. Because even when you have such a regime where you have democratic elections, if you give the government all the power without having some kind of mechanism to check this power, then it is very dangerous. And we see it in countries where you have elections, but you always choose the same person. They're not fair elections, and that person has all the power. And of course, the examples are many all around the world. So you have to have a kind of checks and balances, usually between three different entities. You have the government, you have the parliament, so you have the executive branch, the legislative branch, and you have the courts, the judicial branch. And the idea is that none of them have the full power, but that there is an element of separation of authority and of checks and balances. The argument of those behind the reform is that today there's a disruption of the balance and the court has all the power. So the idea is to change this in a certain way. The problem, and maybe we'll talk about it later, is that even if that's true, the fear is that the idea here is to give all the power to the government, so that's again not checks and balances.
Exactly.
The third important principle, I would say, is the rule of law. And not the rule of law because law is the most important thing as a concept, but because the idea is of a democracy that everybody is equal before the law. So the government itself is also has to respect the law, and that's actually one of the most important protections for the simple person, the regular
citizen in the center.
The citizen has to apply, the rules will apply to him in the same way that they apply to the prime minister or to the minister. So that's also a very important principle. And then we come to the issue of I would say the substantial part of democracy, and here also the liberal part also enters, and that's the idea of respect of human rights. The idea that every person in the country has rights that cannot be, that the government cannot take away. Basic rights for freedom, for respect, for representation in the court, the most basic rights. And then we have also the idea, which is the liberal idea of equality. People are equal. They are not
above the law.
Grade A, grade B, not only above the law, but those that have more rights than the others. And that includes also the protection of the minorities.
Exactly.
The minority also has its rights, and you have to protect the rights, and the majority cannot take away the rights of the minority. And then we have, I would say this is already part of the essential political idea, is all the freedom of speech, freedom of having a really free and powerful opposition, the idea that you can criticize the government, a free press.
Freedom to demonstrate.
Freedom to demonstrate, freedom of political association, all these maintain the idea that the government can also be replaced. So once you have a government and you're not happy with it, you can replace it through elections, but you have also the process that will enable it to be replaced in de facto.
I mean, crucial, of course.
So I think that's in general. In Israel, we have also another, I would say, very important, I would say, basic balance that we have to maintain. It's between the Jewish and democratic identities of the state. And sometimes they go to the same direction because there are many Jewish values that are democratic. But sometimes there is a tension, especially when we look at religious issues, at, I would say, national ideas that can clash with democratic and liberal concepts. And here this balance was created in the Declaration of Independence, and it's a challenge throughout all the years of Israel's existence, how exactly to maintain this balance.
This is really critical for understanding that democracy is not just the majority rule, but it's really keeping, as you said, the rights of minorities. What is, you discuss it also in your article, what is the connection between this and national security, Israel's national security, both on a domestic and international levels?
So if I start with the domestic level, so first of all, when we look at the basic values that are defined in the Israel's national security policy, where we don't have an official one, but you have papers writing on them, and one of them, there is of course, maintaining the physical integrity of the state and the protection against its enemies from outside, but also maintaining the values of Israel. And its nature as a Jewish and democratic state is one of the tenets of our national security. I mean, if Israel loses its Jewish identity, then we would see it as a problem of national security, and the same if it loses its democratic identity. Moreover, on the practical level, for the citizen, for the person, the resident living in Israel, if he is or she is killed by a rocket or by burglar, eventually it's the same result. So internal security is part of national security when we talk about crime, especially if it's widespread crime. But we also, if we look at it this way, it also includes being protected against the regime itself, against your rights being deprived, for example, your freedom being deprived by the authority itself. If police, the IDF, the security services have unlimited power, they can impact the everyday lives of people in a way that is worse than an external enemy. So that's also in the idea of national security. But then I would say a few more points about the importance of independent judicial bodies, of checks and balances. So the one is that when we have these checks and balances, it enables, or it, I would say, helps the state to act in a more professional way, not take into account, I would say, political and sometimes corruption ideas that are derived from personal interests, and and that's also important for the establishment, the military establishment. We see it in Russia, which is an extreme case, of course. We see the military, the big forces, the military of Russia coming into Ukraine and being defeated time after time. And one of the reasons is because of corruption, they didn't have the right equipment.
You say this affected the army itself?
This affected the possibility of the army to win its battle. Okay, so we don't want to get there. Okay, and one of the ideas there is that you have to have the right people, professional people that are taking only a legitimate, professional considerations when making these decisions,
yes, and not
political and not corruption.
Sure.
Which we see when you have less checks and balances, you have more corruption. That's a given. Next is the central, one of the important elements of national security is a strong economy. So I'm not an economist, but we have all these economists warning about the implications and potential implications of this reform on Israel's economy, because investors will not invest in Israel.
Yeah, they will withdraw the investment.
Yes, they will withdraw. The credit ratings will go down. Israelis will leave. The brain drain. Yes, will leave. Especially the high-tech sector is under threat. And again,
we see all of them demonstrating on the streets.
Exactly, and corruption itself is, of course, bad for the economy.
Of course.
So if the economy is weakened, that weakens also national security. And last point on the internal front is that Israel has a big minority and has different sectors with different positions. One of the ways to, I would say, to diminish the potential of all these internal tensions becoming internal unrest and violence is by having channels, legal channels, when you can go to the court and get your right and be heard and get your rights and somebody telling the government, you have to respect the rights, then you don't have to go to the street and demonstrate is one thing, but go and carry out riots.
Yes, claim it through a violence.
Claim it through violence.
Yeah.
So it's very important to have this channel, and more generally, when we have cohesion, when we have different sectors, but all can be heard, then this helps the internal solidarity. And the internal solidarity is very important for national resilience. And national resilience or social resilience is one of the important components of national security. It makes us be able to face our external enemies. When we don't have that, it weakens us as a society, it weakens the state, and it's bad for national security.
And exactly on this point, I'd like to dig more deep. What is the threat that you detect in the reform itself? You discussed on how, you shared with our viewers what should be in a corrected
I only spoke
format.
about the internal.
The internal. I mean, we're just about to arrive also to the international perspectives. What is the threat that you detect in this reform? What is it about? What are the characteristics, the threats that you see on the long term?
So I think that it is, first of all, legitimate to carry out reforms in the judicial system, in the legal system. And I think some of the points in the reform are actually quite logical. And I think no system should be beyond any kind of criticism or any kind of change, and the judiciary can improve.
Okay.
The problem here is that there's a combination of many elements, all weakening the system, giving not only a lot, I would say even stronger, total power to the government, and that would disrupt completely the balance, the checks and balances. And all this is also on the background of a government that in which there are elements that are not democratic and not liberal. We see the ultra-Orthodox parties, both the Yadut HaTorah and Shas, for example, don't have women. They don't have women, not by chance. They don't allow women to be part of the representatives in these parties. We see Avi Maor as an example.
Education?
That has that got the authority on the extracurricular activities, who is, I would say, anti-liberal. He doesn't believe in equal rights for women. They don't even believe in rights for handicapped.
LGBT.
For LGBT, but even handicapped are perceived as someone who shouldn't have benefits from the state. So these are very illiberal elements that have a lot of power in the government, and that's why the concern is that by taking away the checks and balances and taking away the power of the court that has been the one balancing between, as I said before, the nationalistic and religious and liberal democratic nature of the state, the courts were the ones doing the balancing on this side. Not so much the government and the Knesset. And that was when they were more balanced than today. Today, when the Knesset and the government is so, the coalition and the government is so not balanced, I mean, there's so much power to those that don't believe in liberal rights and ideas. The fear is that this combination will disrupt completely the balance that we have created between Jewish and democratic, and it's also would be irreversible. Because once you give all the power to the government, any government,
there's no going back.
There's no going back. It won't say, oh, you gave me too much power, I'll give it back.
Exactly.
So that's why the people are in the streets. That's why people are losing sleep, and there's so much concern. Not because of one reform here or another. I agree. I heard the interview with Yariv Levin. He has very good points.
Minister of Justice.
The Justice Minister explaining his reform. I can agree with many of the things he said.
He's talking about over-legalization, overpower.
Yes, and I agree. I was a legal advisor. I think there was too much involvement of legal advisors. I think the court at the time, but it has changed, was too much of only elites, only like-minded judges. It has already changed. And those things have already changed. Maybe there's more changes that should be done, but slowly and in a way that creates a true balance, not in a way that disrupts the balance completely. Clear. That's the fear.
So when I'm trying to really understand the side of the ones who are really in favor of this reform. They're saying they're strengthening democracy. What do they mean by this? Why do they think this is a strength for the democracy?
The main argument that is made is that governments we have right-wing governments or governments controlled by the right-wing for many years, but they are not able to move the policy and to implement the policy that they believe in, that is more nationalistic or religious or conservative, because they're all the time stopped by the courts.
Yeah, that the court intervenes too much.
And that's not democratic, because you have here judges that are not chosen democratically, that the judges choose the judges or have a lot of big say in who will be the judge, overruling and overriding and cancelling decisions made by those chosen by the people.
And this is exactly what they want to
change. And they want to change that.
Yeah.
And I say, first of all, I think there is a certain exaggeration. We explain in the article,
which will be, by the way, published very soon also in English. Yes.
That this is the description itself is exaggerated. I'm not saying. I said before there were cases that I believe the court shouldn't have interfered. I think that, for example, there was the very known case that created a very big political problem of what to do with the enlisting of the Haredim to the military. I think the court was wrong to intervene there. It was a political decision, a political compromise. They shouldn't have intervened. And there are other rulings that I don't think they should have carried out. But again, and I think also it's good to have a bigger variety of judges in the court. And maybe the system can be modified to it's already been done. We have much more religious judges, conservative judges. Maybe more can be done.
But being chosen by politicians?
No, exactly. No. So see if the committee. We have a committee that has been actually a model. It's been other countries have come to learn from this model, because in other countries sometimes the model is very bad. The US is it's considered a very bad model, for example, where it's very political. But even there it's balanced, because the president and the Senate are not necessarily from the same party. So there you also have a political balance, but it's very political. I think going to the political way and giving all the power to the politicians, especially when, unfortunately, we see also a problem of corruption, of criminal cases. This opens up the way to having judges that are representatives of the government.
And we see it, by the
politically
way,
and also maybe even personally corruption.
Yeah.
And we see what happened in Poland and
Exactly.
Hungary.
Poland, Hungary, Turkey. We see
Yes.
there are examples also in other countries in which it doesn't work.
And we see how it starts with removing the judges that we don't like,
Yes.
appointing the judges that we do like, and then starting to take away the rights first of the opposition, of the minorities, then of women,
Yes.
and LGBT, and eventually workers' rights. The right to strike. So it starts one place, it ends another place. It's very dangerous. That's why the idea is that this reform is a good thing to check, to make things, to improve things. First of all, you need more judges. You need more. The cases take too much time. Everybody agrees on that.
This is a very big problem in Israel.
Yes,
it sometimes takes years for.
Yes,
yeah.
there is something not the way that the court can cancel laws is not legislated anywhere. There should be legislation. It should be written in an orderly, organized way in a law.
But through communication with the
communication,
court.
and
Yes.
again in a balanced way, not in an imbalanced way.
And this is now the question of definition. It's clear that one side defines balance in a different way than the other side, and that's exactly.
I think giving all the power to
what
the
is
government
balance?
Is not balance. I mean, we can agree on that. And I think the government is trying to disguise this because they are putting all the emphasis on the criticism on the court. I say, okay, criticize the court, criticize the legal advisors. But when you offer the alternative,
Politicians.
if you're giving all the power to the government, that's not.
This is not the answer,
Okay,
and there's no way back from
to
it.
Say, there's not enough balance, so there's an imbalance. So let's create another imbalance.
Exactly. Now turning into, we talked a lot about the domestic level, not turning into the international level. Having a strong Supreme Court is very important, as you stated in the article and also here, a very important principle of liberal democracy. This is something that we share with Western democracies.
Yes.
What is the threat now if we're going in a different way? What's going to happen with the international community? How are they going to see it?
Yes. So here, I'd say first that the idea that I said the court was the one all the time maintaining or protecting the liberal aspect, but many times it was done with the, I would say, acceptance, and I would say even it was they were grateful. The government was many times grateful for the role that the court played, because the prime minister understands that we want that in order to remain part of the group of the democratic states, to have our very strong ties with the U.S. and with the Jewish community in the U.S., the Jewish lobby that is very strong, has a very strong impact on the U.S. administration and with the rest of the world. And especially today, when the world is going again into camps and you have the democratic states and the liberal ones and those that are not, the prime minister understands the importance.
Populism. Yeah.
And this is already, for many years, it has been understood. Now it's becoming even more important because of what's happening with Russia and Ukraine and China. And many times there was pressure from these non-liberal parts of the government, the more nationalistic, on the right wing, ideologically, and also again the ultra-Orthodox and the very religious, to have non-liberal ideas. And it's easier many times for the prime minister. It was easier, instead of saying, no, I don't believe that that's right. And he's a liberal person, Netanyahu, for example, and our prime ministers until today were liberal people. It was easier to say, okay, I'll try. The legal advisor doesn't allow it, or the court doesn't allow it. So the court was actually maintaining these liberal ideas that enabled us to maintain these good relations we have with these important states. And
joint values.
The people maybe don't understand how central the United States is for Israel's national security.
Special relations.
These special relations. So if we take away the power of the court and you have a very strong power of these elements in the government, some say they actually control the coalition today, we will very soon see an erosion in these liberal and democratic values of Israel. And this could translate into us being eventually outside the camp. And outside the camp means, first of all, losing US support, which is very crucial to our national security, but even losing our technological edge. Because
you
today,
this in the article.
If you see in the US national security strategy that was published recently in October, they say they are going to share the new technologies, the important splitting edge technologies, only with like-minded states. If we are not part of the like-minded states, we will be outside this club.
Which means states that have the same system. And
yes,
not
the same ideas,
illiberal
the same values.
democracies.
And then that would be a fatal blow for our high-tech, even if the investors are still here. Okay? So
high-tech, internet, I'm thinking
yes,
also...
but high-tech is, I don't know, 50% or 40% of the taxes and more than 50% of the export. So we have to understand this connection on a
greater scale.
Yeah, on a foreign policy. Now, in addition, Israel is under a campaign against it in the international level for many years. The UN General Assembly is a hostile body. The UN Human Rights Council is a hostile body. It really comes to liable. I've been many years on the forefront.
Exactly, you have so much experience.
Yes, of defending Israel in these kinds of fora and in legal fora.
The
and
ICJ.
Explaining why we are a democracy, why we have challenges, security challenges we have to balance. But we have courts that are there to see that we are respecting the law. And these arguments that I and people like me in the Foreign Ministry, in the Ministry of Justice have been making all these years, have been making it possible to stop, even if you have these very bad resolutions of the UN General Assembly, Human Rights Council, of bodies like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty and the BDS. So they come with all these terrible accusations about Israel, but we managed to limit their impact on those that make the decisions. Because those that make the decisions understand that they are saying things that are not true, and that Israel is democratic.
And it investigates itself.
It investigates itself. It has a courts that protect it.
That is managing
So it's not right to, for example, divest or carry out sanctions or do any particular steps because Israel has this legal system. And specifically, we have in the criminal sphere, we have what is called, first of all, the universal jurisdiction, where countries around the world try to prosecute war criminals. We have a case in Spain where about the Shahada case, never mind, against Israeli officials, where the judge threw them out and said, Israel investigates itself. It has an excellent Supreme Court that decided that there's no case for a criminal investigation,
and they dropped the
proceedings, and they dropped the case.
Mm-hmm.
And today we have the International Criminal Court, where we have an open investigation already on potential war crimes of Israel from June 2014 onwards. And one of our main arguments, we have many arguments, but one of them is what is called the principle of complementarity. The court, the International Criminal Court, is not supposed to interfere when a country investigates itself. And that has to be a genuine and professional investigation, which means that you have to have a professional and independent
and a strong
court system.
Supreme Court. Yes.
If we don't have that, we lose complementarity. Israelis can be arrested in 123 countries, state parties to the ICC, that if there is an arrest warrant, that can be secret, by the way, they have to arrest the person and transfer it to him or her to Hague.
Is this something the coalition takes under consideration? I don't know if people really think about the consequences of really implementing it on the field. These are very, very important things that you mentioned. What is the way out? What do you recommend now for decision makers to do? How to solve this?
I think, first of all, I'm also worried about the internal rift and I would say, violent debate that is going on today inside Israel. And I think, first of all, we have to understand that reforms are okay. And some of the arguments that are made by the government are
legitimate.
And it's okay also to accept that the judicial system can do sometimes wrong. It's not can do no wrong. Okay, that's on the one side. On the other side, I think the government has to understand that if it will continue with this reform, just because it has at the moment a political
agenda,
and because
this is an ideological
ideologically,
debate.
And because now they have the power to break the system that they think was against them all the years.
To create
it's a little
new
bit
Israel.
like, I would say, and I'm sorry to say, a bit childish. Okay, you have the power. You are angry about the system. So what are you going now to, like we say, burn the club?
Burn the club.
we say.
And invent a new one.
Yes, so I say, okay, to reforms. Hear everybody out. You can do it even quickly, but in a way that creates.
They're saying they're hearing everybody,
but they're not
saying,
really hearing.
Yeah,
and
this
again,
is the thing.
they are more focused. I heard the interview with Yariv Levin.
Yeah.
The whole interview was what is wrong with the court? What is wrong? Why is it? And then when he came to the ideas that he's suggesting, he said, in two words, trust us. He said, we will take the power. We will trust us. You can't trust the courts, but you can trust us. So I say, maybe I don't trust.
On which ground?
I agree that you don't trust the courts, okay? But
trust us?
Do I trust you?
Yeah.
And they say, look at the level of trust of the Israeli public in the courts. It's so low. First of all, it's very low, among other things, because of the campaign against the courts. But even so, the trust to politicians and the government is even lower. Okay, so if you don't trust them, okay, don't trust them. But
Then
don't
who to
expect
trust?
us to trust you.
Okay.
So don't.
This is not an argument, you say.
Don't fix an imbalance with another imbalance.
If it's not broken, don't fix it.
And especially when you're the imbalance, when the courts has too much power, maybe it makes it difficult for the government to implement policies, which is not a good thing. If the government has too much power, then it's irreversible.
Okay.
There's no democracy. Eventually, it's a break of the system. So you have to be very careful when you do such things if you really want Israel to continue to prosper and to continue to be a Jewish, democratic state that everybody feels welcome and continue to succeed in maintaining its national security in the future.
Pnina, thank you very, very much for enlightening us on this crucial issue. Now, really, it is really a number one topic in the agenda of the Israeli society. We are about to celebrate 75 years of Israeli independence, and let us all hope that the values on which this country was established will remain strong and not be hurt by anyone. Thank you very much to Pnina and to the viewers, and see you next time.
Thank you.